All right, it looks like we are recording. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today, Saturday, November 23rd. I hope everyone's been having an amazing semester. I know I have been. I'm pleased to announce to everyone that today we will be having our next guest speaker, Mr. William MacMillan from Andesite AI. Without further ado, I'd like to thank everyone in attendance, both in person, those who may join us through Zoom, and also those watching us through the playback, whether this is on YouTube or wherever posted. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone, invisible microphone in my hand, to our guest speaker, Mr. William MacMillan. Here you go, sir.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And my teammate and colleague, Dave Brown, is here with me too, also an experienced CISO with fascinating career. So the two of us are going to kind of tag team this thing. Thanks for the intro. What we thought we would do today, gang, is just keep this really informal and kind of tee up a conversation. So we'll kick off with some intros. We'll tell you guys a little bit about our respective careers. And then Dave has some material to just kind of guide a discussion. But what we would really love is if it's interactive and if you tell us what's on your mind and what you want to talk about, and we can just have a conversation. I think that would be one of the funnest ways to do this. And ultimately, if it's interesting to you guys, I've got everything set up here. If you want, I can show you the cybersecurity analytic product that we're building and bringing to the market in early 2025, just so you can get a feel for the types of AI powered tooling that are going to be coming to the market. And I think you'll hear more about this AI for cybersecurity category over the next couple of years. So, if the Q&A slows down and you guys want to see that, I'm happy to tee up the product and show it to you as well and talk a bit about the company that Dave and I work at called Andesite. So, anyhow, I'm William MacMillan. Feel free to call me Billy. I think the reason Michael reached out to me was because I was the Chief Information Security Officer at the Central Intelligence Agency at one point, but that's just a tiny little part of the story. So I'll kind of give you a backgrounder, and my perspective on this is not that I find myself particularly interesting, but rather I really like folks to know that you can get into cyber from a whole bunch of different places, right? There is no one career that gets you into cyber. And in fact, one of the things that's really happened over the last 4 or 5 years, people have really started zeroing in on how valuable it is for people to come from diverse backgrounds and, just getting a variety of different ways of thinking and a variety of different intellectual perspectives thrown at some of these cybersecurity challenges we all face today is actually considered a really good thing nowadays, maybe more than it was 10 years ago or so. So we can talk about that a bit. But anyways, as for undergrad, I went to the Air Force Academy, where I was good friends with the guy who's the CEO of the company that Dave and I work for now, but we'll get to that part of the story later. And I initially, after being a biology major at the U.S. Air Force Academy, I became a helicopter pilot. Was not particularly into computer science, to be honest with you, at that point in my life. This was obviously decades ago. But I was kind of what you would call a STEM kid and was always interested in technology writ large, just not specifically comp sci. I'm not one of these people who was, trying to hack the interwebs back in the early days. So I did the flying thing for about 10 years in helicopters, doing a lot of what's called combat search and rescue and also special operations type stuff, which brought me to the Middle East. And I spent a lot of professional time focused on the Middle East, picked up some language skills, and was doing that stuff kind of in the late 90s, rolling around to about 2000. And right around that time, that made me interesting to the Central Intelligence Agency because we had some terrorism problems in the Middle East, and they were looking for people with area knowledge and with language skills. And so my friend Brian convinced me to apply for a job at CIA. And I started working there around 2002. And initially, I was what I proudly refer to as a knuckle dragging operations officer. So I was working in a field that's called human intelligence, and was running around the Middle East, running terrorism operations, that kind of thing. Was not initially super focused on cyber at CIA either, But what happened is over time, I became increasingly involved with some of the technology teams that CIA has. As you can imagine, your tax dollars go to some pretty decent capabilities in the intelligence community. And I started really enjoying working with the cyber teams. So when I eventually came out of the field after about 10 years and landed back at our headquarters back stateside, I decided to get into cyber full time and landed in what nowadays is called CCI, the Center for Cyber Intelligence. Back then, it used to be called IOC, the Information Operations Center. And I got involved in cyber elements that used cyber as a means to collect intelligence, to keep America safe, and to get intelligence, so that we knew the plans and intentions of our adversaries. So I did that for quite a while and sort of rose up through the ranks in some of those jobs. And then eventually, towards the very tail end of my career, that work on the intelligence side of cyber ended up allowing me to pivot. And I was honored to be asked by the leadership at CIA to become the Chief Information Security Officer for my last gig there. So, unlike Dave, who has a long and distinguished history on cyber defense, I was really kind of a late comer to the defense side of the house. And, I could tell you some funny stories about just like not even really understanding what compliance was, because that wasn't something that we had to worry about on the offense side of the house. Right. So I had a lot of learning to do. It was a busy job. We had a lot of fun. And then I ultimately retired a few years back out of that job. And I moved to a big software company called Salesforce. And I worked there for about a year and a half as a senior vice president of information security. So doing really similar cybersecurity type stuff there. My buddy Brian, who is CEO of our company, Andesite, he called and convinced me to leave that to join Andesite and help build out this cybersecurity product company, which we can talk about a little bit. But I maintained a relationship with Salesforce, which is a great company I greatly admire. And so I'm very happy to still be an advisor to Salesforce on national security affairs. In addition to that, I'm the chief product officer at Andesite, the company that we'll tell you a little bit more about. And I also advise a number of small cybersecurity startups. So I try to stay, pretty involved in lots of different aspects of cybersecurity, and just giving you guys a little bit of that orientation so that, during the conversational Q&A part of today, you got a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from and which corners of cybersecurity I'm familiar with. So that's me. Dave, you want to take it away?
I don't know. It's always very difficult to follow Billy, quite frankly. He has a great background. Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity to join everybody today with Billy. This is an exciting opportunity, and I'll talk very little about my background. I promise we don't have very many slides. I know how horrible it is to sit in an audience and look at slides all day long. So I started out in the Coast Guard. So similar to Billy, I have a military background. I retired after 21 and a half years, and I spent a third of my Coast Guard career at the Coast Guard's Hub of Technology. So I was involved in cybersecurity for a good portion of my 21 years. And the last job I had there was managing the incident response team for a 40,000 user network, while I also managed the 200-acre facility security to keep 200 people protected. So like zero responsibility, right? But where I really started out was like kind of a 911 operator on the high seas, where keeping merchant mariners alive. And when I started to do incident response, I had kind of this calm approach to it, and I loved it. I loved keeping the bad people out of our environments, and had several opportunities to do that. And then when I retired, I started working as like consultants for companies like Microsoft and Symantec and a host of others. But where I really found my passion was in startup companies, and specifically CISO positions, meaning I was building security programs for startup companies. And I've had the honor of being able to work at Andesite to do that very thing, which has probably been one of the most exciting and probably one of the most complex programs I've ever built in my career. But it's been a heck of a lot of fun. The other thing I've done is I spent 7 years as an adjunct teaching at the undergrad level, so I really appreciate what you all are doing. And then a year at the graduate level at WVU Parkersburg, and the remote program. In addition to that, I'm also the president of a security chapter, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, as giving you another opportunity to think about places that you can go and network, which will be super important. So I'm getting ready to go into my 13th year as the president of the ISSA chapter. I'm either doing a great job or no one else wants it. I haven't made up my mind which one it is. And then because of my passion of building cybersecurity programs, I had the opportunity to go ahead and author a book, which Billy was nice enough to write the foreword on building startups, lean startup cybersecurity programs. So my background is all over the place. It's a little bit different, but I'm also very similar to Billy's. I spent a number of years in the intelligence community. And in fact, I worked at a startup company that kept great people like Billy and others safe in not so nice places in the world. So that was a lot of fun to do that. So enough about that. Hopefully you guys will have some other questions and we can help you as we get to Q&A session. And more importantly, I want to give Billy enough time to be able to show the product because it's super impressive. I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions for me and Billy before we move on. Okay, silence is acceptable. So just want to kind of go a little bit into some of the cybersecurity trends. I put these slides were put together primarily based on the conversation that we had with Michael and some of the things that he said he was interested in for the group. So what are the trends in cybersecurity? And the biggest thing that's I think has become very prevalent is the AI cyber attacks. They've become so super sophisticated where they're actually sort of amalgamating these different attack types. So what I mean by that is they'll take phishing and then they'll take very sophisticated things that look like a DocuSign thing and they'll dupe people into, giving credentials where then attackers have access to all these contracts and things like that. So imagine, what an attacker can do. And AI is definitely helping them with that initiative. We'll see a lot more about zero trust. I'm sure you have probably studied some of that, at least some of you have. We'll see a lot more regulations with AI that could be good or bad depending on one's perspective. And the last bullet is the integration of cyber AI into cyber defense. And that's what Billy will actually show. That's what we're building at Andesite. And that is going to be a game changer for those that are sitting in, any sort of intelligence positions or security operations center positions, somewhere where there's mass amount of data to have to dig through. I'll pause and see if Billy has anything he'd like to add to that.
No, I think you're hitting on the exact ones that I would, Dave. I think what's going to get interesting, and you folks are preparing yourselves to get out there in these careers, is that the adversaries are picking up these capabilities and they're going to be coming at you fast. I like to say that defenders nowadays are being attacked at internet scale and machine speed. And so those of us in the private sector here at these product companies, we're working really hard for you. You guys are the cavalry. We really need you out there on these cyber defense teams. And we're trying to build tooling out for you that is going to allow you to not just keep up with those adversaries, but we really want to restore the advantage to the good guys. So we want defense to feel calmer and like you have a more sustained advantage over all of this badness that's going to be coming at you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the other things that I picked up and Billy and I chatted a little bit in Slack is the workforce trends, right? What are we going to see in the cyber? We've had this skills gap shortage for a very long time. Depending on whatever survey you look at, it's 3+ million missing of our skills. And I have a couple ideas that I like to share with everybody to think about. One of the things that we're going to see is obviously more requirements for AI. AI is not going to replace us. AI is going to give us the opportunity to work with AI to solve these, kind of complex problems and be able to actually get insights and actions a lot more quickly. I mean, I've worked in SOC for a number of years. I led the Nation Security Operations Center. And I can tell you could spend days, weeks, sometimes months, researching some of these, big attack types. And then sometimes you're in a rabbit hole and everything that you've done was for naught. So AI is going to really help sort of us get away from that frustration for those who may end up in the Security Operations Center someday. And so, the talent shortage will continue, and it's going to require CISOs and senior leaders within the InfoSec and cyberspace to actually think a little outside of the box. And what I mean by that is, how do we get talent in and train them in? And there's technology AI can leverage, and you'll see that a little bit later on. But also, we're going to have to upskill and sort of re-skill employees, right? those employees that aren't familiar with AI are going to have to become familiar. So we may look for folks that are in IT and transition into cyber. And we're seeing a big uptick in CISOs who are actually transitioning out of cyber and into like chief technology officer roles, chief product officer roles like Billy, chief operations officers, those types of things. So we're seeing a lot of interesting cyber workforce trends. Some of it's due to wanting to go and try something different. Some of it's frustration. I mean, it depends on the individual, and there is a tremendous amount of stress within the cyber realm, and that's where AI is going to help, quite frankly, and we'll going to get to that a little bit. And then again, the integration of AI and cyber roles, I've kind of talked about that a little bit. Billy, you got anything you'd like to add to that?
No, again, I think this is perfect. I'll let the product demo kind of speak to this, because I think seeing it in action will really help all of you picture, well, what does all this mean? AI in cybersecurity roles, like what's it going to do to my job? And I think we'll, a couple of quick workflow demos in our product, and you'll get a really good idea for what we're talking about and how that might look in the future.
Awesome. Now, one of the things I learned as an adjunct is I always get this question, like, how do I get a job after college? And it's an extremely fair question, and it's not always easy. So the idea of the next couple slides is just to give you some ideas of things to think about. If you already have internship opportunities, you're very lucky. If you don't, maybe some of the things that we splash up on the slides will help get you kind of noodling. So some of the first things is if you're looking for jobs, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, those are a couple good examples. You don't necessarily always get your jobs through those sites, but like LinkedIn is a professional network site. This is an opportunity to follow, the industry experts and see what they're saying, learn how they're saying it, right? Because if you can go into an interview and you can sort of echo that same sort of terminology that we're using in the cyberspace, it will help you outside of all the stuff that you've done within your academic work. And then a couple ideas on the private sector side. Auditing is kind of one of those things where a lot of junior level folks start out with, as well as help desk. The thing that's really good about auditing is kind of this repetitive thing, and it may not seem very, like, I don't want to use the term sexy, but sexy, like maybe, working in a security operations center. But the reality is you get to actually look across the entire business. So your focus tends to be just beyond cybersecurity, and you can learn a heck of a lot more. So it's something to consider. There's big auditing firms like KPMG, Symantec, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, those types that you could potentially get on as an intern or even as sort of an associate. So those are good opportunities to look. And again, help desk gets you in the door. You get the, network with the security folks and learn what they're doing. And eventually they'll evangelize to get you into those positions.
Yeah, I had a couple quick thoughts on this one.
Yeah.
On this topic, I really like to emphasize to folks in college and in graduate cyber programs, if you're not starting to get out there and network a little bit with people who are in the field, you should. Because one of my favorite things about working in cybersecurity is there's a really strong feeling across the community that we're all in this together. We really want the talent to come up through the ranks and be prepared and have the best educations possible and the best networks and connections. So you'd be amazed if you just reach out to people in these roles. They're genuinely thrilled to help folks, look for internship opportunities or, opportunities coming right out of undergrad or out of various graduate programs. So, really do maybe stretch yourselves a little bit if it doesn't come naturally to you, but get out there and start introducing yourselves to people on LinkedIn or, track them down on the interwebs in whatever way you want to. But get out there and start meeting folks. And we're super happy to help you and help you understand the different types of jobs out there that are out there. And that's the other thing I wanted to double click on that Dave mentioned is, a lot of times folks coming out of school, they want to go right into security operations, or maybe they want to specialize in, forensics or something like that. Awesome careers. And there's absolutely no reason not to focus on those things. But I do think if you think cybersecurity is the career for you, that you should think broadly and you should want to get exposure to the different disciplines, even if they're not the ones that seem, like the super exciting SOC work all the time. So I think that's a great point that Dave made.
Great. Now I'll switch a little bit, and I think my thing is in the way. And if it is, I'm sorry. Okay, that's a little bit better. So maybe government opportunities, maybe the government, something that you want to think about. I remember, excuse me, in my time in the government, and I was there for about 4 years, they had a scholarship for service. And I remember interviewing some of these folks, and it gave them opportunities to go and get graduate degrees where the government paid for that, and then in turn for service within the government. This link's in here, and Michael, I'm happy to provide these slides to you so that you can click and get more information about it. But there's nothing wrong with 25 or 34 grand for even just a stipend while you're going to college, and then getting some government experience. That experience then helps you out. If you look at like the director of HCSO.gov, for instance, who's standing down at the end of the year, she started in government, she spent time in private sector, went back to the government, and that becomes sort of a what some folks do, and it might be an interesting career opportunity to think about. You can also look on usajobs.gov. There's a lot of opportunities specifically for if you're interested in internships and things like that. It's a different resume style, I will tell you, than private sector. And if you're starting on it, I'm not the greatest at it, but I'm happy to give whatever guidance and advice I can. So I'll pause on the government opportunities and see if Billy has anything he'd like to add to that.
There's the government sector can be a little confusing. And so this is one where I think it's really helpful to reach out to folks in the space or who have previously worked in the government space. Because there's what I find is quite a few college students, believe it or not, reach out to me. And I will usually try to get them pointed in the direction of some folks who can guide them in maybe a little more detail than I can. But it's confusing in that you can work for government agencies as a staff employee. For example, in the intelligence community where I come from, they call that being a blue badger, because if you're a staff officer, your badge is blue. But there are also heaps of opportunities for cybersecurity jobs working for private sector companies that feed those people into the federal agencies, right? So if you walk into a SOC at CIA, NSA, NGA, DOD, various government entities, there are going to be a mix of staff and contract people in there. And all those jobs are awesome and exciting. And being staff versus contractor, it's just a little bit different flavor, and they both have their pros and cons. So I just want to highlight that it can be a little bit confusing. So don't be afraid, again, to wave your hand in the air and ask for a little bit of help. And some of us who've been there will try to guide you a bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good news. This is the final slide. I told you I wasn't gonna bore you too much. So other opportunities to think about. I'm gonna actually expand a little bit on what Billy was saying. I'm gonna start with the second bullet first. So the networking is super important, and the idea of reaching out on LinkedIn is great. That kind of stuff is awesome. But like the ISSA, the Information Systems Security Association, ISSA.org, which I've been involved with for many decades now. Is an incredible opportunity to actually attend those meetings in person, right? You get to actually meet the SOC leads, you get to meet the CISOs, you get to listen to what the potential problems that they're having, and then think about how what you've done in your college work could potentially help them out, which will lead to my other point, unpaid internships. If you have the luxury to do it, consider it. My cybersecurity manager at Andesite, this is the second company we worked together at. He came as an unpaid internship at my last startup company, and now is building a security operations center capability, web application set program, penetration testing, vulnerability management, right? I mean, he's doing a tremendous amount of work, and it's all because he did that internship and he had referenceable experience. If you can get a CISO to go, yeah, come on in, or a SOC lead saying, yeah, come on in, and you can put all that in your resume, then you'll have that person as somebody who will reference your work effort while you had that time at that organization. So just a couple kind of like out of the box things to think about. And I'll turn it over to questions and answers, which is the most exciting thing. And then give Billy time to actually show the Andesite platform. Anybody have any questions for us?
Anyone?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. I'm done right now. Can you guys hear me okay?
I'll just turn it up.
So, I was just kind of like asking, just for example, like your company, do you guys look for people with AI experience when you're looking for people to like hire on? And I guess seeing the product demo might be better, like a question after the product demo would be better to see what you guys actually do exactly. But I'm just trying to think of like, because I work in a stock right now, but I don't have any like AI experience. And just if I was ever trying to get into a space with like AI cybersecurity blend, I'm just trying to think of what like skills I would want to like obtain, or if like companies are looking for AI specific people, or if there's like different realms you guys kind of focus on trying to hire them.
Yeah, I'll jump in and then Dave can tag team. So just to kind of explain the laydown a little bit about what you're asking about could look several different ways, right? Like you could just end up in a SOC that is using a lot of AI, and there are going to be different demands for different skill sets depending on what that technology stack looks like. In our case, and this part will make more sense after the demo, what we're really trying to do is abstract complexity away from analysts. So if anything, if we do our jobs really well, it won't be another massive skill set that you need to bring to the table. In fact, it will facilitate you being able to do more advanced work without having to learn all kinds of crazy querying languages and that sort of thing. That'll shine through in the product demo. Now, if you want to go take your security operations experience to a product company or something like us, that'll be a different story. Then that'll be evaluating your security ops skill set and your willingness to take on, some new technologies might be really helpful to try to convince folks to bring you into a situation like that. So for example, we have 2 staff threat hunters at Andesite that are there to guide our engineering and product delivery team on how threat hunt expertise gets baked into workflows, and we're building that into our platform. They're very experienced guys. And then we have an advisor who's literally one of the world's top threat hunter, a guy named Chris Merritt, threat hunters. Chris Merritt, Chris with a K, you can look him up, used to work at CrowdStrike. And he's one of these guys they airdrop in when something terrible happens, and he can find the Russians in your networks and all that kind of stuff. So we have some very, very high end security operations expertise in our company. So those are just some different ways that you can kind of have those 2 worlds come together. Dave, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. And I think, it depends on the organization and the problems they're trying to solve. I think there are some organizations that are still sort of a bit averse to AI, and there's a lot of others that are sort of thinking ahead and thinking this is going to help solve complex problems, help folks like you come in, maybe with 1, 2, 3 years experience and actually function as somebody who has 8, 9, 10 years of experience. So I think you're going to see a blend of it, but I guess the reality is looking at the job description will give you a very good sort of insights into what they're looking for that. And if you're not comfortable with a job description, you could either apply for it and learn more, or you can, look at a job that maybe you think's a little bit more within your comfort zone. But AI is here to stay, from my perspective.
This is a question kind of about there's starting to be a bit of a consumer industry. Like before, people they would buy something, like they'll go on the internet and they would buy a pineapple. But now I'm seeing a lot of kids with flipper zeros. And I was wondering if where do you think that would lead in the future? Like, do you think that it would lead them down a path of being more into cybersecurity and learning how technology works, or do you think that would lead them to being criminals?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not sure I got all of it, but it's something about, will something lead them into going into cybersecurity or go into the path of a cyber criminal? Hopefully not the latter. You eventually get caught. It's not going to be as nice for you, right? But I think people get influenced a lot by the internet, if that's what the basis of the question is. And I think that the more that people are sort of in isolation, they can sort of fall victim to that kind of stuff. But That's where it becomes important for folks to keep an eye and make sure that, that is minimized. Billy, I don't know what thoughts you have.
Yeah, I think there were some specifics in there I didn't quite understand, some names of products or something, but I think I get the gist of the question, and this is a thematic thing, right? Over time, is I think people who go deep on technology can use that knowledge for good or they can use it for bad, right? And some of the best cybersecurity people I know spent late nights figuring out how to, hack into their buddy's machine and that sort of thing. And they run Linux servers in their basement and they've got their own racks with Splunk servers and all kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that they, are necessarily going to go down a bad path. So I think, like Dave said, hopefully they're not going to take it in that direction. But that technical expertise has always been a really vibrant part of cybersecurity history. There's some folks working in SOCs and working especially in forensics labs and things like that where they're just national treasures. It's unbelievable how deep they can go on some of the stuff. All right, what else?
I have a question. Isabella Lozano. What are some skills or things that y'all would recommend you practice or research outside of university coursework that would help us stand out when going for any type of cybersecurity position?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll go first and then Dave can chime in. To me, one of the things that's going really well in cybersecurity right now, it's a very positive trend, is that more and more people are understanding the need for soft skills and business skills. So, any ability as a cybersecurity professional, particularly as you go up higher in the ranks, any ability to speak in business terms instead of, nerdy technical terms is really going to help you interact with other parts of the business, because the general trend over 20 years, sort of the arc of history, as President Obama would have said, is that we're moving from cybersecurity being something that the nerds do in the basement to something that is part of business risk management. And there's more and more interaction between cybersecurity teams, in particular the CISO, but not just the CISO, and the senior managers of a business, the business unit leaders, the board of directors, even the CFO. This is a big trend as you're seeing chief financial officers get more and more involved with cyber risk decision making, right? So soft skills in that environment are a must, and business skills are really helpful because instead of talking about, blinky lights in the SOC and isolating hosts and this and that, you can get more adept at communicating with folks in plain English and in a way where you're listening to their questions and you're able to translate the cyber into business terms. Those types of things, anything you can do, even introductory, they do these like weekend, MBA in a box type of classes and things like that. Super helpful just to have some of that terminology and to understand how business people think. And then public speaking, I'm a huge advocate of get yourself out there, and especially if you're one of these people who you'd really rather not get up in front of people and and speak to a crowded auditorium full of people, stretch yourself on things like that. Those are the two that leap to mind for me, is soft skills and business skills. Dave?
Yeah, I think that is actually, they're very good points. And, I spent a lot of years in sort of the technical mumbo jumbo. And when I transitioned into doing startups, I had a mentor say very clear to me, if you want a technical MBA, you want to work in startups, because I get to be involved in so much of the business. And it's really helped me out. One of the other thing that helped me, and, Billy kind of called it out earlier, my time at Insight, is cybersecurity professionals are educators. Like, people don't understand what we're talking about. And unfortunately, the terminology we use is really centered around a lot of kind of like military terminology, things like demilitarized zones and things like that. But I'll also go back to my earlier comment about go and sign up for issa.org, go to those chapter meetings, talk to those people, learn how they talk, right? There's a trend now where CISOs, the CISOs that are probably the most prevalent in the industry are those who did not come back did not come from cybersecurity, but that came from business or other areas of the business. They're the ones that the business is looking for because, to Billy's point, they can speak in terms of the business. They understand the financial, EBITDA, which is all the earnings and stuff like that before all the other things get taken out. And that really helps out tremendously. And it also allows them to map cybersecurity to the business more effectively. So I absolutely agree with Billy's point, and hopefully the added ones help.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. It's a great question. Anything else?
I have one question. I am, of course, behind the setup here. It's a simple question. What got both you as well as Dave into cybersecurity? What I guess about the interest for both of y'all? If you could go into that, please.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I told you chronologically how it happened, but in terms of the motivation, forgive the overly militaristic wording, but I come from the military and the intelligence world, so it's kind of the culture I come from. I viewed it as riding to the sound of gunfire, meaning that's where the action is, right? Like there's something going on over there, I'm heading towards it. And so I could see that happening. Is probably the only time in my life when I accurately forecast something is, I was working in, like I said earlier, human operations, the human intelligence side of the business. But I could just see that cyber was becoming increasingly important in the world, and that criminal activity and even nation state, adversarial activity was moving into the cyber domain. And so I just thought it seemed really exciting to go where the action is. And I started following it, and I've never regretted it. I've never looked back. It's a very exciting, dynamic sector to work in, and you're just never going to be bored. I don't see how you could be bored in cybersecurity. So to me, it was just the exciting and frankly obvious thing to do.
Yeah, I sort of stumbled into it myself, being a 911 operator and having to kind of be calm and, not lose people at sea when all of a sudden the Coast Guard started implementing technology and networking and doing wide area network. I was just fascinated by it, right? I got it, but that was the technology side. But the cyber side I got into because I'm a big privacy advocate. I believe that in order to be able to have a modicum of privacy in this sort of interconnected world, you need to understand how to protect systems, how to protect data, how to make sure that the information that you're collecting on the people around the world, that you're doing your very best to ensure that it's safeguarded against, not only external potential uses, but inadvertent uses. And the way I used to always tell the students when they ask me, what do you love about cyber? What do you like about cyber? My answer was always the same. No 2 days are ever the same. I've never had a single day that has been the same in cyber. And I love what I do. I mean, I love building programs. I love dealing with the complexities. I love aligning to the business. I love keeping data protected from adversaries or, inadvertent disclosure. It's hard. It happens, right? But that's generally what got me into cyber and why I love what I do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any more questions?
So, as someone who doesn't really know anybody in personally in the cybersecurity industry, I know you covered this earlier a little bit, but how would you recommend for me to start networking with other cybersecurity professionals?
Well, you just started. So now you know two people who are, I like to say I'm old, which means I have a decent Rolodex, because you just kind of tend to accumulate it over the decades. So between Dave and I, we know a lot of people in cybersecurity, and we work on a team of folks at Andesite that have been involved in the industry for decades. So we can absolutely help. There are also really cool cybersecurity conferences and things like that, that if you're ever in town and can get into one, it's a great place to meet people kind of, you don't always want to meet CISOs, right? You don't always want to meet people who've been doing this for 30 years. You want to meet people, in their sort of first, second, third jobs as well, so you can hear how their experience has been. And some of the cyber summits are more specific for, you know, younger folks. Like one that I've spoken at a couple times is called the Texas Cyber Summit in Austin. If you ever get a chance to go to that one, there's a lot of younger technical folks, a lot of military and government people at that one. And that's just one example, you know, that I chose at random. So there's just a ton of events you can go to, and they're all really designed for you to kind of go around from table to table, booth to booth, and see what people are doing and network and get cards and those sorts of things. So they can be very helpful as well. Dave?
Yeah, that's really good advice. I also like if you're going for professional certifications like, you know, SSCP, which is, you know, for like sort of a secure focused system administrator from ISC2, go to the conference and then start to kind of chat with people in the hallway. I think the biggest thing that a lot of cyber pros suffer from is, you know, look, I'm an introvert as well. I became an adjunct professor to help me out of that, right? But also go to places like DEF CON. They don't trust anybody there, but if you can start networking with some of those folks and earn that trust, that can really be very, very valuable. And to Billy's point, like we're on LinkedIn, you know, send us invites. If you see people in my professional network that you'd like to meet, I'll do an introduction. It doesn't mean they'll get you a job. It doesn't mean anything, but at least it's a potential introduction. But that's the way you do it. You reach out, hey, I read this article that you posted, or I saw you at this summit, would love to connect and learn from you, right? But if you do reach out to folks for those networking opportunities, remember that they need to get something out of it as well. So be very clear and concise about what it is you're asking them. Would love to pick your mind on this topic. I have some ideas about, would love to get your ideas on it too, right? And it'll pull you out of your shelf. It'll get you connected with some folks that are in the space, and then potentially you maybe could collaborate with them. So, but definitely LinkedIn is one of the best places. And DEF CON out in Las Vegas is a pretty wild, you know, conference to attend. It's not as disciplined as the one that Billy was referring to, but just something to consider.
And huge kudos to Michael and all of you, by the way, for this, for HawkNet, for reaching out to people. Like this is a great way to start and at least get your wheels spinning. There's so many different dimensions to cyber. So, you know, you might as well kind of start getting exposed to it early on, what you're doing. So, you know, huge tip of the hat to all of you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When in chat has any questions, by all means, type away, or you can unmute your microphone if you'd like to. I think that has to do with our portion.